Good evening, YouTube. This is Fifth. Before I introduce my very special guest that I have the opportunity to interview this evening, I wanted to briefly share an experience with you from when I was in the first grade. I recall at the age of 5, there was a kid in my class that I used to hang out with, whether it was in the classroom or at recess or during lunch, play basketball, play games together. And we were hanging out for most of the year. And I remember one day playing on the basketball court, he made some statement to the effect that we were friends. And I remember this feeling coming over me like I had done something wrong because I allowed someone that was not one of Jehovah's Witnesses to believe that they were my friend. It was very clear to me at a very young age that I was not supposed to have friends that were not Jehovah's Witnesses. And so I actually went home that day, and I remember I was very disturbed by him using that word to reference our relationship. And I literally came back the next day, and I told him, I'm very sorry, but we cannot be friends. You're not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And the look on his face, you can only imagine as a little kid, he was very confused. It's like he didn't understand the words that I was saying. And I remember later, as a teenager, I remember sharing that story with my parents and telling them what had happened because I never forgot about that. And I remember them getting a little defensive and saying something to the effect of, "We never told you to tell people that, to have that attitude." And I was thinking to myself, yes, you did actually, and the publications did as well. It was always emphasized. Now, whether I was supposed to tell him that to his face, that's another issue. But it was always emphasized that your friends are Jehovah's Witnesses. People in school are your classmates at best, your associates. Maybe some of you can relate to being in a car group, maybe field service with some children from the Kingdom Hall. And somebody will, one of the little children will say, "Yeah, my friend at school." And they'll actually get corrected by somebody, whether it's their parent or an adult in the congregation, and say something to the effect of, um, I'm sorry, you said your friend? Is he one of Jehovah's Witnesses?" They would correct them and really inculcate that, emphasize that in the children at a young age, that they're not to have friends or consider people that are Jehovah's Witnesses, people that are not Jehovah's Witnesses, their friends. So with that lengthy introduction, I now have the opportunity um, give a warm welcome to someone who I can now openly refer to as my friend. Honestly, we've been friends since the 5th grade, since we met. However, I was never able to admit to myself or refer to him openly as my friend because he's not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. But I thought it would be interesting to speak with him because although he has no affiliation directly with Jehovah's Witnesses, because of his association with me from the 5th grade all the way up until community college, I believe he's able to share a very unique perspective from a very unique vantage point. So, Nate, definitely want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for being willing to be interviewed this evening. The first thing I wanted to ask you is, what is your background, religiously speaking?
Religiously speaking, um, I grew up going to a private school, a Catholic school. So I grew up believing I was Catholic. My parents, we would go to church uh, on Sundays. It's not every Sunday, very frequently.
Okay.
And I would ask my parents, what kind of church is this? And they would say, oh, it's a Baptist church. So then a few years later, again, I asked my parents, oh, what religion is like grandma or, our grandparents, because they went to a different church. Um, and my mom was like, oh, we're all non-denominational. You go to church, you go by the Bible, and that's the extent of it. So I was able to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty much my religious background growing up.
Okay, definitely appreciate you sharing that with us. So, as it relates specifically to Jehovah's Witnesses, do you remember um, what was your impression or opinion of Jehovah's Witnesses as a child?
Matter of fact, I do. Um, so my first interactions or time seeing Jehovah Witnesses was a child, very young. I'm not sure how young, 5, 6, 7, around that age group. And I know that on weekends they would knock on our doors, and I would be excited to run down and open the door. And my parents, don't open the door, it's Jehovah Witnesses. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know who they were. I was like, I couldn't see through the peephole at that age, so we had a balcony. So I would run upstairs and look over the balcony. And I would see people dressed up in suits
Right.
and with pamphlets, and there sometimes they may even look through the window, or sometimes I know some of them are relentless. They would knock and knock, and they won't go for a while if they know you're home.
Yeah.
So, but I would see them walk around the neighborhood, and when people would answer the door, they would talk about talk to them about their pamphlets they had with them, and spreading the word.
Right.
So that was my first time seeing, or that's how I got introduced to what a Jehovah Witness was.
I see.
Just knowing not to answer the door, something very negative or whatever. But
Right.
yeah,
I see. Okay, so as I mentioned, I believe I mentioned that you and I met in the fifth grade, and you moved from a different area. We were in the same class, and we had most of our classes together up until as I said, community college. So just starting back from the fifth grade in those early years, where we were hanging out a lot at school. How was your impression of Jehovah's Witness shaped just by your interaction with me, and how it is that you saw that the religion affected my life as a Jehovah's Witness child?
you're the very first Jehovah Witness I've ever met. So, as a child, I'm not too familiar with the ins and outs of religions, and what they practice. But when I met you, it was very clear. You stood out more than anybody else's religion in there. I'm sure everybody in there was different religion, but yours stood out. You appear, even as a child, just isolated. I remember events, Christmas party, or maybe Valentine's Day, cupcakes or candy, like you wouldn't eat it or touch it, and it was because of your religious beliefs. And the teacher, I remember our teacher, she told us, like, she even told me, like, I do remember this. He's Jehovah Witness, and just don't kind of pressure him. Don't kind of make him feel any kind of way. He doesn't do this, and I was fine with that. Didn't That was the rules? That's the teacher's
Right.
rules. That's the rules of religion. As a kid, you respect rules.
Hmm.
Um, but the first thought was very I know, just isolated. But you were comfortable being isolated. You were very structured, even as a child, very by the book.
So basically, you were able to observe the effect that my religious beliefs had on me. The fact that it kept me away from parties, and when the cookies and cake would come out, 9 times out of 10, it was something that I couldn't be involved in, and you
Exactly.
understood that even at that early age, right?
Exactly.
So as we kind of continued, middle school, I remember because I was already baptized by the time we met, as you know. And I remember in middle school, I was auxiliary pioneering. And I remember you being very aware as to what that meant, and you even helped me out. Do you remember that at all?
Yes. Yes. During that age, I remember like WWF or WWE being very popular, and kids
Hmm.
were into that, if not that, sports. And that wasn't your big thing. Wasn't too into that. Um, Very clear that the Bible and spreading the word was your main focus, even at that age. And you expressed to me what you were doing, and I would be curious and ask questions about the knocking, the street witnessing. How long do you guys have to knock for? How many hours? And matter of fact, I have X amount of hours to go this week, and
Hmm.
me, I've always found myself very curious as far as religion, God, the Bible. especially growing up to a Catholic school, being baptized, then being told we're non-denominational. It's a lot, you know. It's the only thing I knew. I believe in God and the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't affiliate as strongly as you to a certain kind of group.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having conversations with you, and you be more than happy to, tell me the word, break down scripture, explain to me why you guys do some of the things you do or don't do some of the things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had 6 hours or 4 hours left of studying or auxiliary pioneering to do, I'm like, well, you can talk to me, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Right. Okay. Yeah, definitely appreciate you sharing that. Now, I do remember there was a point in which we started kind of having more in-depth biblical discussions. I believe even before we graduated high school, at some point we studied or at least tried to study, and you even went to the meetings a couple of times.
I remember in high school, we met, or we're not met, but we went to these, you invited me to this meeting. We were studying prior to that, though. Um, I think you've seen that I was interested in this, and you invited me out to some meetings you guys had, multiple meetings, even to your house for your house for studying. And
Mm.
I remember at some point, because in high school we took many classes together. Um, really enjoyed your company. We had a lot of things in common. Our personalities clicked even from the fifth grade to middle school to high school, to the point where we took every single class together one year. Uh, it was brought to my attention by you that we couldn't hang out outside of school. It wasn't allowed because of religious beliefs. And I wasn't sure if I fully understood the reason, but it came down to we don't share the same views on religion, and because of that, we can't. In your words, I just found out recently we were not friends because we don't share the same views. And it reminded me when I first met you, very isolated. And this was another reminder that there's still isolation there. We're cool, we're friends in my eyes, we're friends, but to a certain extent. But I really enjoyed your friendship, Ryan. And I'd rather have you a friend at school than no friend at all. So at school, we took every class together. We got straight A's. I remember it was very, my first time getting straight A's. We took Spanish class together. Very first time taking Spanish, and I struggled through it. It wasn't so much of a struggle for you, um, but you began going to Spanish meetings and joining the Spanish congregation. I remember you giving the speech, your very first big speech in the Spanish congregation, and you're talking to me about it while we were studying and how you have to prepare for that speech, and you're kind of nervous about it, and you're just practicing getting ready for a while, and you invited me to come. And I remember I showed up not knowing what to expect, not even expecting to understand anything, and I understood very minimal from my education and its background,
Right.
but I was there, and to me, it was important for me to show up because, again, in my eyes, that's my friend. I played sports, and it was very important for my friends to come to the games and show up and have some support. And to me, that's what friends do. So even though I may have not understood everything that you were saying or what the message would have been, the message literally could have been anything. It could have been anything.
Yeah.
I was there to support you.
Yeah. Okay, I definitely appreciate you sharing that. Now, I remember when we had spoken earlier, as you said, there was a point where we started studying the Bible together. Sometimes you would come over my house, other times I would go over your house. And I remember your parents, you told me later that when different events would happen, you would be having a party for whatever reason or a get together,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and your parents would tell you to invite me. What was your response?
My parents always liked you. You're a super respectful young man. So, my parents, they're very, um, they heavily influenced my friends. They don't let me hang out with certain kind of people, or they talk to their parents first before they come over. And they really liked you. They thought you were a good friend for me to have around. So when I would have end of the year parties, I had a swimming pool at the time, a swimming party, and like people to come swimming, you couldn't come. Birthday parties, you couldn't come. And well, I understood you couldn't come to a birthday party. But then I was like, my parents were, well, it's not a birthday party. We're just having a swimming party. Summertime, invite your friend over. Tell Cliff to come over. And I was like, oh, he can't come. And I told him, he's Jehovah Witness. He can't come. And that was pretty much the end of that. They didn't question too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the stereotype is worldly known, or Jehovah Witness, they don't celebrate a lot of things. They don't participate in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of just let it be as is.
Right.
But to me, it was hard to understand. And I would ask why, and it came down at the end of the day that we didn't have the same beliefs. We had class together. Technically, we would leave lunch sometimes to go get food, walk to Burger King or whatever the food place to go get food together.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, that was it.
I see.
Um,
So it was very clear to you that our friendship, if you will, our relationship had to be within certain bounds, right?
yes, yes. And we never talked about it, I don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned once or twice when before,
Mm-hmm.
maybe through our study session. But it didn't have to be constantly reminding me at school. Well, remember, we could go here, but we can't go here, or we could hang out under these conditions. I don't think we hung out like that in person.
Right.
I think this talk would come up while we studied together,
Okay. I
and
see.
that's how I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
But it came very clear to me that this was your main priority right here in life. Everything else revolved around this.
Mm-hmm.
Preaching or spreading the word, giving talks, doing what you can to spread the word,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling your purpose. And it became more clear to me when it was time to graduate. During our senior year, since we were both excelling in school, we both got invited to the counselor's office multiple times, and they let us know, we've been offered opportunities to go to a 4-year college with financial help. And these were the universities that, accepted us. And if that's not something we want right now, there's other short-term trade schools type of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to gauge, where do we want to go from here? And you wasn't too interested in the 4-year option. For you, it was something I wanted something quick and get done out the way. Because that's not really my purpose. I want to just focus on continue what I've been doing and fulfilling my purpose or your purpose. And I felt like, in my eyes, that you're limiting yourself to your potential.
Mm-hmm.
Um, of course, it was going to be hard for you to witness and get all these hours you wanted to get. Also, go to a 4-year school and what the studying that requires.
Mm-hmm.
As we continue to talk, you mentioned Bethel. That was a really big goal for you, and you wanted to work your way up and meet the necessary requirements to go there.
Mm-hmm.
That was way more important in your eyes than going to a 4-year college. Everybody, college. I just told myself college is not for everybody, but I thought you had so much potential. And I was like, man, if only he got the education behind it. We, I think, went to community college together for maybe took a class together. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you're halfway in it. Like, I think it didn't last long, you can tell.
Right.
But that's something I know that stood out. This school education was an option, but your main goal was to continue spreading the word.
So eventually, I did end up going to Bethel, and we weren't in contact too much at that point. But I do remember at one point you did contact me wanting to start a study again while I was in Bethel and you were on the other side of the country. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you were motivated to study?
Yes. Again, just like in high school, when something would go on in my life and I didn't have an answer for, I didn't know why it was happening or what, I could always go to, rely on the Bible or go to church or, pray about it. And you helped me with the Bible, interpret things. Um, so in college, again, something had happened in my life and wanted some help, some guidance, um, find out what this really meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to contact you, and you're able to help me find answers. And we would go through the Bible, and you also had the Watchtower pamphlet. We would go through that as well as a good introduction, and help me find similar situations that could maybe help with my situation that happened in the Bible or a story.
Okay.
And this happened here, and this is kind of like your story. This is what you're going through, and this is what they did. This is how they saw the situation. And you can apply this to your life. How can you apply what he did or she did in your life?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was very comforting. Having some kind of answer. I think having an answer, at least for me, for most people, is comforting. So reaching out to you was a no-brainer. I do recall, whether it's high school or even in college while we were studying together, I would have questions though, because not everything added up in my eyes. Everything wasn't as black, as white as you've seen it. There would be times where you tell me, you'll read a scripture and says, well, this means this. This is what this is saying. And I would read the same scripture and say, I see this. And I know it could have been frustrating at times, like, how come we cannot see it says this, it clearly says this. And I could be like, how come you don't see it says this? Like, how did he even get this?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And certain things are up for interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be things, for one example, I remember is the birthdays. Birthdays is big. Birthdays is one of the main things you guys are known, or Jehovah Witnesses are known for not celebrating. And you told me that, well, in the Bible, somebody had passed away during a birthday. And so that's an example why we shouldn't celebrate birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that from that example, from that scripture. I don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
I see that somebody passed away at a birthday party, and that's somebody, as simple as that.
Yeah.
And that you're trying to explain to me, um, this is why it's here. Everything is in the Bible for a reason. This is why it's here, and maybe other examples of things happening at celebration or parties why we shouldn't celebrate it. And my interpretation could be, somebody passed away at this party, and that's it. Or I could say, well, people get together and party and starts partying, things to go sour.
Mm-hmm.
This is examples of things going sour at parties, and not necessarily mean don't celebrate any birthdays. But that's an example of different interpretations.
Right.
And as a kid, for sure, as an adult as well, young adult, heaven is a place that many people want to go. Mm-hmm. The idea of heaven. And you told me that your belief is that only 144,000 people could go or are there or can go. And even at the time, I'm thinking, and I'm not the biggest math geek in the world, but I'm like, mathematics, like there's billions of people on Earth right now. And 100 years ago, there was X amount of people on Earth. 100 years prior and 1,000 years prior, there's been a lot of lives on this Earth. And for only 144,000 people to go, that didn't sound too encouraging for me. And I was like, man. But to me, that didn't make sense. I didn't think that was mathematically make sense to me.
Okay.
And that's the birthdays, the amount of people who go to heaven, or those are two things that stood out for sure that I didn't agree with.
Right. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but when you would not agree with something, what did you see as far as my reaction?
Very black and white. It wasn't pretty much room for interpretation. And if I didn't see things exactly how you saw it, there's something must be wrong with me, or I'm not getting it. Obviously you don't understand, you know, or uh, it just something was wrong with me. It was never too much room for interpretation. It was never I could see how you could see that way.
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't feel it that way. Um,
Yeah.
I liked our sessions because it wasn't forced upon me. Like, well, you have to see it this way. Like, you didn't, but you didn't really respect or accept my interpretation of it.
Right.
Or you just don't get it, or maybe I'm just being difficult. Maybe I'm just being difficult. Maybe I just want to fight just to fight, argue just to argue.
Yeah.
But multiple times, we had different interpretations on reading the same scripture.
Mm-hmm. I see. So, fast forwarding a little bit to maybe closer to this time, we would still be in contact every once in a while. I might send you a scripture, and admittedly, a lot of that time you knew I was counting my service time. So sending you a scripture, or calling you up, talking about whatever, but making sure that at some point, we're discussing something scriptural, because that's kind of the justification for the communication. That's the only way it's legal, essentially. And more recently, um, I had reached out to you, and we had ended up meeting up and having a meal. What did you notice? And for the audience, this is prior to when I was actually disfellowship. But what is it that you noticed at that time when we got together and talked?
Prior to this meeting, I haven't seen you in it's a while since I've seen you last. So when you reached out to me, I believe, to have this meeting, of course, I was excited to go. Um, when we were talking, you looked like a different person. I know your eyes were super red. It seemed like you were going through a lot. Um, it also was late in the day. I wasn't sure if you were just super exhausted, but the presence you had, our interaction was very. It stood out to me. It stood out to me. You look like a different person. You look like you're going through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There were even times where we were having a conversation, and you would say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that again?" And I remember you ending that night pretty abruptly, saying, "You know what? I'm sorry, I can't right now. I'm going through a lot. It's not you. And I'm kind of tired right now too. There's a lot going on, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, thanks for coming and hanging out. But it looked like you're extremely stressed and going through some kind of struggle. Something's going on in your life. And at the time, I didn't know um, until shortly after that thing you told me. Maybe a few months later, but at that time I didn't know. But at that time, it seemed like I've never seen you that way before. You're always super energetic and charismatic, and this time it was a person I didn't recognize.
I see. So then, shortly after that, eventually, it was after I had been disfellowshipped, and we had a chance to, to kind of talk. And obviously, I was definitely down and sad at that point. What is your impression as you understand how I have to be treated at this point by my family, and how I have to be treated, or anyone in my situation, how we have to be treated by family and friends that are still Jehovah's Witnesses? What is your observation as you've seen someone go through that?
Unfortunately for me, for what it sounds like, it doesn't change even though if you're family, if you're blood. You're with us, and these are the rules when you're with us. And if you're not with us, don't forget the rules still.
Right.
The same rules still apply no matter related or not.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that, I've never, my experiences with Jehovah Witnesses has been mainly through you. I don't have any Jehovah Witness friends or didn't have many acquaintances prior to you.
Right.
So I didn't know what to expect, but to see that from your family, blood family, that these rules still apply, and it doesn't even matter. It's not even based off if you're a good person, have goodwill, because you're still the same person that I've known since fifth grade. Just because since you no longer a witness, you still have the same good intent. I've seen you talk to people and help people through their issues and their problems, and just the same thing as you would do with me going through the Bible. You would still use the same foundations to help other people out. You're still the same person.
Right.
Only thing that's changed is your belief system, your interpretation of things, and because you no longer share the exact same beliefs anymore, that has removed you from family, family and close friends, which has been to me unfortunate. Cause I've seen what it has put you through. You know, losing family who are not gone, who's not yet gone on this earth is a situation I can't imagine. All that being said, we've talked about it prior that being a witness, I'm sure you've seen people who've been disfellowship or no longer a witness, and that was the rules you had to abide by. Granted, it wasn't blood, always blood, but you understood the rules, and it's difficult to me. It's a very hard situation to believe or to be in because I know how important this religion was to you and this belief system and preaching where you went, went you made it to Bethel. You made it, and that was a big accomplishment to get there. You spent hours and years to get to that point, and I know you still have a lot of respect for the what Jehovah's Witness being Jehovah's Witness has done for you. But at the same time, other end of the spectrum, on the opposite end, and knowing the rules, knowing the viewpoints of people and their thought process, being on the outside end, it's kind of hard to reason. You may feel like how I felt back then when we were studying. I try to give you my side of the story, my interpretation, and you may not have been as open to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To me, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't know too many people with Jehovah's Witness friends or acquaintances. Even when I would tell people, "Hey, that's my friend over there," it's like, what? Like,
yeah.
Because people didn't have Jehovah's Witness friends because of the reasons you've explained to me.
Right.
And it was very shocking to me. You just told me this a few weeks ago that now you're glad to finally openly call me your friend. And I was like, we've been friends since fifth grade this whole time. I've been telling people this is my friend, and
yeah,
gotta find out like now you can openly say. I didn't know it was that deep.
Yeah.
The way you opened it up, this conversation, I didn't know it was that deep. And
right.
So I hope I was able to shed some light to my perspective into the JW community and being an outside observer, a close outside observer for all these years.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels good to call you a friend now.
Yeah, right. exactly. Yeah. No, definitely appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time out. Your insight has been very valuable. And thanks again, man. Hope you have a good night.
You too. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
All right. Likewise.
Thank you.
Take care.